All right, guys, so I had a recent student of mine come in who was really struggling with his contact and consistency, and the root of all of that had to do with his poor takeaway. Now, he had come in and said he'd been working on his takeaway for like 10 years and wasn't really able to fix it. I showed him this drill that I'm going to show you today. Said, hey, this is the only takeaway drill you need to worry about. I'm going to show you that and how to use these clubs on the ground. Let's define what a good takeaway is and what the feels are that I showed my student that's really going to help you. And shout out to Poor Zach Golf. Absolutely loved his thumbnail and title for this. We modeled that one. If you haven't checked out Poor Zach Golf, you want to check them out. Great videos. But he's got Adam use a very similar drill to this 45-degree drill, which I'm going to show you with some slight little variations. Now the takeaway, probably in my last, let's say 10 lessons I did in person, about half of them, right, at least 5 of them, came in and had a faulty takeaway of some kind that led to issues later on during the backswing and downswing. And so the takeaway matters to the degree that it affects the rest of the swing. If you've got a good takeaway, which we'll define what that means in a minute, and that helps you get on plane on the way back and on plane on the way down, beautiful. But if you're off that plane at any point, you're always going to struggle to try and catch up on the way down. If you can do it, totally good. But for every golfer I see who's got a poor takeaway, who ends up hitting it good, for every one of those golfers, I could probably show you 10 that have that same fault, that aren't able to make up for it and have poor contact. And so you want to make sure you get this part correct. You can fix a lot of other parts in your swing. Now, let's define a good takeaway first. And we're going to put some images on the screen you'll see, and then I'll give you the main drill and add layers of detail as we go throughout. The first thing we're looking for with a good takeaway, and we'll see Justin Thomas and Hideki here. I like to use them as models a lot. The first thing you want to do is what we call keep the club on plane. Now what that means, and we'll put this on the side of the screen here, if we drew a line up the shaft that's set up, we'll use that for what we call swing plane. It's always a good idea to stay on plane. Always, always, always a good idea to stay on plane. Why? Because when you're on plane early, it's easier to be on plane at the top, which makes it easier to be on plane coming down, which makes impact and contact a lot easier. Can you get off plane, just draw that line again, above it or below it and make up for it and get back on plane? Absolutely. It's just more difficult to do. It's just more difficult and less consistent. So on plane like those pros, we'll see the club head rides up that plane line. That's what on plane means. We'll also notice the club face when the shaft's parallel to the ground from down the line, slightly tilted down. Toe is slightly in front of the heel, right? You can see that line on there. Now we'll notice as they go back, right? A couple things here. Number one, the body motions, which we'll talk through. The body motions you're going to notice, both Hideki and Justin Thomas, when they go back. Notice the lead shoulder relative to where it starts to get the takeaway and club on plane goes where? It goes slightly down. Okay, the shoulder, the left shoulder goes slightly down, and the trail shoulder goes slightly up. Now that's a big key because as the lead shoulder goes down, there's a little tilt. Notice the lead arm stays very close to the torso. You'll see that circle on there. The lead arm's not way away, it's very close, okay? So the lead shoulder goes down, trail shoulder goes up a little bit, and the arm stays very close. That's what enables it to stay on plane. The bad version, I'm going to show you how to fix with this 45-degree drill. A lot of the players that I work with, and this student in particular, if we draw that plane line up again, gets too far inside or under that plane early. And when he got too far inside, that led to flat and then steep and then lots of standing up, inconsistent contact. So to keep the club on plane and do all those good things that we just mentioned, club on plane, club face slightly tilted down, right in this position here, basically right down the toe line. You want to have your club head basically cover your hands or be slightly outside or inside's okay, but basically in line with your hands here. Now, if you're like my student who went way too low and inside, I like to use this 45-degree or clock system to help. Now, here's the feel. When you take your setup position, I want you to go from your setup to the time your hands get to your thigh. Now, normally during a takeaway, you'll see Adam Scott from face on. By the time the club gets parallel, the hands will be outside the thigh, right? There's a little width there. But to get to this good spot that we want, first things first, let's take your hands from setup to your trail thigh. And where I want you to have the shaft at this point in time, where the butt of the club's in line with your trail thigh, from my point of view, is basically over this 2 o'clock stick or this 45-degree stick, right? If this club and this club made a 90-degree angle, you're basically trying to cut that in half, okay? Or if this is 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, the middle club's at about 2 o'clock, this club's at about 3 o'clock. We'll show you that from overhead view as well. We're trying to get this roughly over that first club. Now to get there, what I really want you to feel is that your body is controlling that motion. You'll notice there's a little bit of tilting. This is where people go wrong, and my student included. There's a little bit of tilting and a little bit of turning. So when I go from my setup position, my hands to my thigh, even right here, right, where I've got the club basically in between this 12 and 2. I've got it at about 1 o'clock. When I feel it about here, I haven't added a ton of hinge yet. We'll get to that. I want a little turning and tilting from my hands to about my thigh, okay? And as I continue turning and tilting, that same sort of club position, once I get parallel to the ground, we'll put it basically down that 3 o'clock toe line with that perfect club face. My student, who went too far this way, had to really feel like the club head stayed outside his hands to get to this initial checkpoint over 2 o'clock, just to here. And the point is, when we go too far under the bad version, notice what that looks like. Now, I'm exaggerating, but notice what that looks like. My student had a high left shoulder, had a big space between his arm and body, and had lots of forearm rotation. So really taking that steering wheel and turning it clockwise. That's bad under plane. What we need to feel, what he had to feel, and you're gonna need to feel as the hands go back, is that that lead shoulder stays low. Let's show the models again. The shoulder actually goes down. Notice the space between my bicep and pec stays the same. It doesn't get wider. As soon as my arm goes away from my chest, notice my hands go out and the club goes in. Not good. If you want to keep the club head outside your hands, you have to keep your arm in, closer to your chest. As I'm doing the shoulder down, arm in, there's no gap there. That's what enables me to not have as much forearm rotation. I don't want to have a lot of forearm rotation. In fact, you may need to feel in the beginning like you've got effectively no forearm rotation, okay, to this point. The shoulder's down, the arm stays in, and I've got very little forearm rotation. I want you to take the club back to your thigh, over 2 o'clock. The club head's still slightly below my hands. Keep turning and tilting, and that gets the club basically right down my toe line here. Okay, that's effectively the feel that I'm looking for. Not afraid to exaggerate in the beginning. Now, as we do that, the hand path, people ask me, Eric, do the hands go out? Do they go straight back? Or do they go in? Well, they go pretty much straight back, slightly arcing in. Slightly arcing in. Some players will do it different, but on average, slightly arcing in. Okay, from here, we'll look at the models. You'll see the hands will arc very gently in during the takeaway. One thing people miss, which is from the tilting and a little bit of the arm folding, also notice the circle around the hands also go slightly up. So relative to the height they started, they don't stay the same level. They go slightly up on the way back. It's just adding some layers of detail. Slightly up. Okay, the hands go ever so slightly in and slightly up. How much hinging should we have, the guy asked me. Only a little. I'm not gonna go here. Some players say push down on it to really hinge it. I'm okay with that if that works for you, but what we'll see with Adam Scott from Face On and the models from down the line is the amount of angle you have with your hinge at setup, you only add a very little bit. It's a gentle hinging from here. Hands go slightly in and up, gentle hinging. The trail arm, you'll see at the setup position, has a little bit of fold. Okay, the hands go slightly up and in. The wrist hinge vertically just a little bit, and the arm folds just a little bit. I don't have no hinging under plane. I don't have all the hinging in the world over plane. I've got a gentle hinging. I don't bend my arm right away, that's under plane. I don't keep it dead straight, that's over plane. I've got a gentle amount of folding, maybe 10, 15 degrees at most to get to that checkpoint that I'm looking for. How about the back and forth wrist motion? He said, hey, should I really set my trail wrist back right away? I said, well, not really, just a little bit. Okay, that's the answer to a lot of these questions. How much do the hands go in? A little bit. How much forearm rotation? A little bit. How much hinging? A little bit. How much wrist back? You guessed it, a little bit. So relative to the setup, my right wrist is like pretty flat. It doesn't stay flat to there. Okay, it hinges back. How much? A little bit. A little bit of arm, right wrist hinging back, just a little bit. A little bit of each of those to get to that checkpoint. Now, when you're practicing this drill, the goal is to get over the 2 o'clock, okay? By the time your hand's over your thigh, feel that. You're like, holy Eric, that feels way outside my hands. Good, good, perfect. Now keep turning and tilting until it gets down your toe line. Your shoulders should feel tilted. My body's turned, but how much? A little bit. No, I'm just kidding. It's like 30 degrees, right? Okay, my chest and shoulders have turned, I guess a little bit, but about 30 degrees. A little bit of turning, okay? But I'm feeling here. Even if you want to pose the club head even with your hands at that point, I'm okay with that. A little bit here, and then keep turning and tilting it down to your toe line. But most of you need to feel like you're out over that 2 o'clock and then hit and use a mirror video to check it. What's our goal? Always on plane. On plane is always good. When is on plane not good? Never. It's always good. On plane, always good. So how we did with my student, and granted, we spent about 45 minutes on this. Okay, so we went back. I said, okay, let's do 2 rehearsals. Feel the club head outside. The hands don't go out with them. Okay, the hands go gently in. Club head's outside the hands. The shoulders down. Remember, the arm stays close, and the club head feels outside the hands. So, okay, let's hit at about 50% speed, trying to feel that same thing. Let's go ahead and hit, and then let's look at video. Okay, so we hit ball number 1. He was still too far under plane. This happens a lot in the lessons. And this happens a lot where you might be, in this case, where you're like, hey, man, I'm really posing this good takeaway. It's like perfectly on plane. And as soon as I hit, I go right back to underplane. The problem there is you shouldn't be posing perfect in practice. You should be posing the opposite of your issue and exaggerating. Say that with me. You should be posing the opposite of your issue and exaggerating, not perfect. So if you're too far under plane, hands out, club in, you need to really feel the club head outside your hands, pretty exaggerated. At minimum between this 2 and 3 o'clock, maybe even between 12 and 1, like very far out. How far out? To the point where when you watch on video, it's right on plane. Where do we always want to go? Right on plane. Okay, right on plane. So 1 or 2 rehearsals, same thing. Shoulder feels down, arm feels in. There's very little forearm rotation. Okay, gentle hinging of the wrist, but that's not the main cue. Shoulder down, arm in, club head outside the hands. And we do the same thing. I'd say, okay, let's check and see that. And slowly, we got it really, really good on plane. We probably hit about 5 to 6 balls at like, 20% speed, honestly, very slow. Started getting better. And I said, let's ramp it up a little bit, 30, 40% speed, 50, 60% speed. So after 45 minutes, we got to like 60, 70% speed. Okay, so you're not gonna get this in one swing, but you can put this in your practice and actually get it. And if you're able to get the club on plane, let's put that line on again, with the club face slightly tilted down, you're golden. If you're someone who goes too far under, I just talked a lot about that. Every once in a while I get the opposite, where the arms and hands go way out like this. You're in good shape with the club head outside your hands, but the hand path went too far out. The only risk of that is if you get no depth or if you come too far under at the bottom. If that's you, then you just need to feel the hands working in more as you go back, okay? In more. And even if you just pose between this 2 and 3 o'clock, is totally cool. 1 more, 2 rehearsals. Shoulder goes where? Down. Okay, I'm turning and tilting my shoulders. If you don't feel any of your core motion working, you're not doing this right. It's not all arms, right? Shoulder down, arm stays in. Club head feels like it stays outside the hands. Notice from face on, the butt of the club should be getting outside my thigh from here. It's not this. I'm not just setting it right here, right? That's not the deal. So same sort of feel. 1 or 2 rehearsals, left shoulder down, arm stays in, club head outside the hands. And that's the feel we're looking for. So, the hinging one, like Porzak talks about a lot, he likes a push down hinge to get the club set and on plane. Totally cool with that. When you go back, the more you hinge your wrist vertically, the more that puts the club head up and out. So if you're going back and the club's too low, imagine I don't hinge my wrist at all, thumbs down, the club will be low and inside. So if you add hinge, it gets it up and outside. You're allowed to add some of that. How much? A little bit, okay? Get the club on plane, club face tilted down, 45 degrees. Now that gentleman I work with, I'm not gonna give him like 6 takeaway drills. It's just this one. Know what to look for in video. Go slow enough and exaggerate enough till you get there, right? And then rinse and repeat that. You probably want to do that 20 to 30 times, probably 2 to 3 days a week for the next 3 to 6 months, okay? Now, if you want help with your swing similar to this, so we could diagnose and give you a game plan, would love to see you at CogornoGolf.com. If you can find a time to come and see me here in person, would love that as well. But go to CogornoGolf.com, send your swings in, let us diagnose it, build you a plan as well. Any questions, always leave a comment down below.